When you picture citizen science, what do you see? A field site maybe? A researcher with a clipboard? An app on your phone asking you to photograph a butterfly? Probably not the library down the street. And yet, some of the most important infrastructure for building trust in citizen science has been in local communities for decades, open to everyone, free to use, and almost entirely overlooked by the research world. Public libraries aren't the answer to every challenge citizen science faces, but they might be the partner we haven't been paying enough attention to. This is Trusted by Everyone, the fourth episode in this podcast series, recorded at that library event in Ljubljana on the 11th of June 2026 as part of the ECS project's final series of events. I'm Aishwarya. Let's get into it. Carolina Duran coordinates the ECS project at EXA. She's appeared in earlier episodes of this series talking about women's health research, about the fisherman who learned the dolphins' names, about what it means to enable other people's science rather than do your own. At the Ljubljana Library event, she said something that reframes the entire conversation about inclusion in citizen science.
Public libraries have been doing what we call citizen science for a long time, just calling it under a different name. And we also have a lot to learn from them on how to engage local communities long-term. What are these communities interested on? So I think this connection between citizen science and public libraries, it's really, really important.
We have a lot to learn from them. That's a significant admission from someone who has spent years building citizen science infrastructure across Europe, and is the thread that runs through every conversation in this episode. Before we talk about what citizen science can learn from libraries, it helps to understand what libraries actually are, not in the abstract, but in practice, in the communities they serve every day.
A public library is a bridge between researchers and general citizens, a bridge between normal life and everyday life and research and science. And because we can provide many things to the researchers and to science, we provide our venues, we provide our expertise, we provide data, we can teach the average citizens how to use computers, how to search for certain data, how to use different applications. So a public library is a very important bridge between science and the everyday life.
That's Agnes Koren, Director General of the Metropolitan Library of Budapest. And what she's describing isn't a new role libraries are being asked to take on. It's a description of what they already do, every day, for free, for everyone who walks through the door.
I think public libraries are the most important locations in local communities. So everything that happens should happen in a local public library. And as such, I think that citizen science should be fully involved in anything that public libraries do, especially when we're talking about local studies, so a memory of the history of a local community. And it's a great place to connect people with their roots and connect people with researchers that they would never met.
Aleš Kleman works at Ljubljana City Library. And that phrase, connect people with researchers that they would never have met, is doing a lot of work. Because one of the persistent problems in citizen science is that the pathway between a curious person and a research project is not obvious. It requires knowing who to contact, how to frame your interest, which institution to approach. Libraries already sit in that gap. They already know their community. They've already had the trust that research institutions spend years trying to build.
We are also a part of the community, so we can engage people around us better than researchers can.
Andrea Volkiskish, also from Ljubljana City Library, said it plainly, not as a criticism of researchers, but as a statement of structural reality. Libraries are embedded in communities in a way that universities and research institutions, however well-intentioned, simply are not. The most interesting moments in the Ljubljana event weren't the arguments for why libraries and citizen science belong together. Those were convincing, but somewhat expected. The most interesting moments were the stories of what actually happened when specific libraries ran specific citizen science projects, and what those projects revealed about the communities they served.
My favorite would be collecting family names in the rural area of Slovenia. I think the same activities also were held in some other countries, but in my country it's so more important because it's connected to family roots. People were living in not in cities, more rural areas, and each of their houses has their own name. And it was not named by the surnames, but the specific name that may be stated that they were on the outskirts, they were living on the up of the hill, they were living by the places where there were no water. So it's also very important for historic reasons. And
a citizen science project about family names in rural Slovenia. It's not biodiversity monitoring. It's not about air quality. Family names, the kind of knowledge that lives in communities and nowhere else. That would be lost if nobody thought to collect it. And that a library is uniquely positioned to gather because it already holds the memory of the place.
My favorite story is our library engaging in citizen science, because we had a project, we cooperated in a project last year where people collected wisdoms, and then they were researching how people check facts. So we cooperated with researchers and prepared workshops on this topic in our library. And then we also had a roundtable on AI and how it works, and can it be used for fact checking? Because researchers discovered that most people used AI as a tool for researching facts.
A library running workshops in AI and fact-checking as part of a citizen science project on how people verify information? That's so cool. That's one of the most urgent research questions of 2026. And a library was the right place to investigate it, because a library is already where people go when they want to understand something.
One of my favorite things were all the diversity that libraries brought to our group of citizen scientists. So we managed to reach a very diverse group of people. And me as a science communicator, for me, it was really interesting because we investigated trust in science, or actually how people do fact checking when it comes to scientific facts. And this diversity of people that join us as citizen scientists enabled me to open my eyes to all the questions people might have about science, or why the distrust in science happens, and how they might believe not evidence-based things, but just like things that they might find online, and they trust them better than like actually scientific explanations of some phenomena.
Zarja Mušić is a researcher and science communicator from the Slovenian Citizen Science Network. And what they're describing is something that goes well beyond data collection. Working through a library, they didn't just reach more people. They reached people whose relationship with science was complicated, suspicious, or shaped by sources that scientists would never normally encounter. That's not a problem to solve. That is information. That is exactly the kind of knowledge a researcher needs if they want to understand how science actually lands in the world. One of the recurring conversations in this podcast series has been about trust, how citizen science builds it, how institutions struggle to earn it, how communities extend it selectively, and for good reason. Libraries have something that almost no other public institution has in quite the same way: unconditional, multi-generational, community-wide trust. You don't have to be educated to use a library. You don't have to have money. You don't have to have a purpose. You can just show up.
Without libraries, where anyone can join in, anyone can participate, anyone can borrow a book, anyone can join citizen science activities that are run by libraries or in libraries. Anyone can do any other activities with libraries. Without this public thing that exists, I don't know how else to call it, but without public libraries, this space would not exist. This space of knowledge, of building trust, of building communities would not exist.
This space of knowledge, of building trust, of building communities, Zarja struggled to name it, and I think that struggle is meaningful. Because what libraries provide is so foundational that we don't have a good word for it. It predates the institutions we've built around it. It's just there, open, available, trusted.
Like I said, we are part of the community, and it's important for us to empower people to understand science better, to trust science again.
To trust science again, and that phrase, like we talked about in the last episode, lands heavily right now. We are living in a moment where that trust, always fragile, always contested, is under particular strain, and libraries, which have never stopped being trusted, might be one of the most important partners citizen science has in rebuilding it.
Yes, there's a lot of collaboration possibilities because the public libraries really can reach out all the age groups, from babies to the elderly, and in all the regions.
Johanna Robinson works at the Slovenian Institute for Adult Education. From babies to the elderly in all the regions, that reach across age, across geography, across the urban-rural divide that so many citizen science projects struggle to bridge, that reach is something libraries have simply always had. I want to end with a story that came from slightly outside the library walls, but that speaks directly to what this episode has been about.
So we actually, through one project, we developed a citizen science application called the Marine Ranger, where citizens can actually help us scientists in the marine biology to gather data about the observation of dolphins and whales and report it to us. For the scientists like me, these data are actually addition to our scientific data, because when you're researching marine life, especially marine mammals that are animals that are always in the move, you cannot be on all the places in the Adriatic Sea the whole time because it's a big sea and we have a very small boat, so we cannot cover the whole Adriatic. But with this application, the citizens, so this means like the people that are either renting the boats, either are sailors, either fishermen that are constantly on the sea, they can help us to gather more information about the distribution of whales and dolphins in general. And what's interesting about that is that they can also spot some very interesting and not so and rare species that we don't see that often, that are migrating only through the Adriatic Sea. So it's a very valuable data that they can collect and send to us.
That's Marinela Sukrocer from the Blue World Institute in Croatia. The Marine Ranger app works because the people who are already on the sea, the sailors, the fishermen, the boat renters, they're already doing the observation. So the science doesn't ask them to go somewhere new or do something unfamiliar. It asks them to report what they're already seeing. Libraries work the same way. They don't ask communities to come to science. They meet communities where they already are, in the neighborhood, in the building they already trust, doing the things they're already doing. And they add the science to that. That's not a small thing. In fact, that might be the whole thing. The ECS project held one of its final events in a public library. This was a deliberate choice. After 3 years of building platforms and networks and academics and ambassador programs, after all the infrastructure, the project ended somewhere that had always been infrastructure, that had never needed to prove it was infrastructure, that just was.
Local libraries are really important hubs that connect to, a lot of people, students, migrants, job seekers, and so on. And so we can widen our network this way and also strengthen them by working with those that already have built a trusting relationship with the community that we haven't.
Working with those that already have built a trusting relationship with the community that we haven't. That's the lesson. Not that citizen science should use libraries as venues. that citizen science should treat libraries as partners, as institutions that have already done the hard, slow, unglamorous work of being trusted, and that have something to teach about how to stay that way.
A public library is a very important bridge between science and the everyday life.
Between science and the everyday life, that bridge has been there the whole time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the ECS podcast series. I've been your host, Aishwarya Vishwamitra, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.